Those of you who've been listening to these airwaves for the past 15 years have heard my voice on and off different times of the week, even different times of the morning. So I appreciate everybody who has listened, even back during, what was that, 2006, 2007 with the Saturday session days, if you remember those. But you've also followed along with me as my career has developed to not just being a talk show host, but also going out and covering news events and turning out news for a statewide audience. And I'll tell you, over the past 15 years, one of the major things that I've seen is an ebb and flow, and even more of a decline in the number of news outlets that are covering things, and not just giving superficial coverage. I'm talking in-depth analysis and understanding of what's going on with your government and your tax dollars. So joining us to talk about this, and I'm really excited, we've got Rick Sanchez. He is the co-founder and CEO of Agua Media. We'll hear a little bit about what that's all about. But Rick, thanks for taking time with us. For people who know your name, give us that background of who you are and where you come from, and why you're the guy to talk about the current landscape of news media. Good morning.
Well, I was the first and only Latino anchor at the national level, at least. I did a show called Rick's List on CNN until they summarily fired me. One of the things I think that's interesting about my experience is that I worked at CNN. I had a show on CNN. I had a show on NBC. I had a show on Fox. I've worked on Univision in Spanish, and I've worked at iHeartRadio. So I basically worked in radio in both languages. I've worked at CNN, Fox, and NBC or MSNBC. So it's pretty much a rich background in covering the news in the United States. And what I think what that gives me is a very full-throated experiential knowledge of what this business of broadcast news is all about, which is why lately a lot of people have been calling me to speak on it.
Well, let's talk about it, because as I said, I mean, even when it comes to the local stuff, we do a segment here every Wednesday called the Council Roundup. I wake up super duper early at 3 o'clock in the morning. I listen to the local Springfield City Council meeting. I digest it. I pull up clips. We air it literally the next morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. And that's where a lot of people get their news about the Springfield City Council, because it's not even being reported on in the paper until days later. Mm-hmm. Tell me a bit about what you've seen across the country when it comes to news coverage of these crucial things that are happening right in people's backyards, let alone the ability to cover what's happening nationally or internationally.
Well, thank God for you, Greg. Seriously. I mean, you're providing a service that needs to be provided and unfortunately is just going away in the United States. And the reason it's going away is because the media has become more and more concentrated. So it used to be that, let's say somebody in Springfield, somebody who had a couple of extra shekels in his pocket would go out and say, you know what, I want to be a part of this community. I'm going to buy the local newspaper or this radio station or this local TV station. And it's part of my community. I live here. I hit those bumps on the road. I pay taxes here. So I'm going to have an interest, right? A dog in this fight of what happens in Springfield. Well, hell, man, that's gone away. Why? Because all the media now is owned by very few people. So you got, maybe one or two companies that own the vast majority of local television stations in the United States. The television stations that you wake up and listen to now in the morning in Springfield or wherever the heck you may be living right now as you're listening to this conversation, it's not owned by anybody who has your interests or is close to you. It's owned by some firm or maybe even a group of a hedge fund somewhere. So what happens is because more and more of the media is owned by very few people, two things happen. First of all, the news is not your news. It's their news. It's easier for them to influence it. And as a result, the stories aren't being told that need to be told for the people of those particular communities. And that's kind of a poison to our business because we are in the business of putting out the information that people should care about. And under this model that we have right now, they're not going to be getting it. And it's getting worse every day, man. I'm sorry to say.
We're talking with Rick Sanchez. He is formerly of a whole bunch of different media outlets, CNN, Fox, and so on. And he is the co-founder and CEO of Agua Media. We'll talk about that briefly here in a moment. But what's the saving grace here? What's the salvation that's going to lift us out of all of this?
Well, listen, I was lucky enough recently. This is an interesting story because this maybe talks to the power of what we can all do as human beings when we care about things. After CNN fired me, I was fortunate enough to say, okay, you don't want me to work here, I'll go do something else. So I got together with some buddies in South Florida. They were doctors, and we started a healthcare company called Cano Health. Cano Health is now a $4.4 billion company, and we took the company public. So I've got a couple of, dollars in my pocket, and I decided I'm not going to retire. What I want to do is get back into the business that I love and adore. I think sharing stories, gathering information, and telling the truth is the most important thing we have institutionally in the United States. And if we lose that, we lose our democracy. But I also know that old media is not working for the reasons that you and I just discussed. So I'm going to take my money and the money of some of the partners who founded Cano Health, and we're starting something in new media. I think the future is in podcasting. I think the future is in streaming. So we're creating Agua Media so we can tell the stories that need to be told with truths that otherwise wouldn't be told because corporations who own the CNNs of the world and the NBCs of the world and the Fox News of the world and the New York Times of the world don't let you hear those truths because they're too big and too concentrated. But new media, we can tell those stories. And that, my friend Greg, is where things are going, to answer your question.
Again, talking with Rick Sanchez. He's been in the media game for a long time in the news business, seeing how news is made behind the scenes and also seeing the corporations continue to consolidate. It's always staggering to see, most of the major corporate media is owned by maybe 6 corporations or something like that. We do have sprinkled all across the country organizations like Midwest Family Broadcasting, which owns this radio station. They want to keep it live and local, especially during the times people are in their cars driving to work so they can be plugged into what's going on. So those companies are still there.
Until some hedge fund comes along and gives them a really big check, which they just cannot avoid taking.
I don't know. I don't know if that'll happen. We shall see. But Rick, I do want to talk about, just briefly here, you got social media that's at play. You've got the Twitters of the world. You've got the Facebooks of the world. We've seen just in the past 2 years, a pretty incredible just about faces and flip-flops when it comes to what information's credible and what information's allowed on the network. For instance, that Hunter Biden laptop story before the election in 2020. That's just one of many, let alone all the COVID-19 stuff that's out there as well, whether it's misinformation or not. Is that a problem when looking at what YouTubers or podcasters or other different types of new media are involved here?
Well, I think part of that is what happens when you create a vacuum, right? The fact that media is not stepping up to the plate and really doing its job appropriately. Media has become siloed, where you have a conservative silo and you have a liberal silo. So you have MSNBC every night flipping over backwards to just do stories to hurt Donald Trump because that's basically their MO. Now you have Fox News doing everything possible to hurt Joe Biden because that's their MO. But it's not supposed to be about who we want to hurt or who we're going to target. It's supposed to be, what the hell is the news? It's not about Biden. It's not about Trump. It's about our country. But unfortunately, they've kind of relinquished that role. So in the process of relinquishing that role, the vacuum is created and the vacuum starts to get filled. And people, as a result, start mistrusting what is going on in the news. They start seeing the news as just another entity of government in many ways. I mean, look at this Jen Psaki story. Jen Psaki is going from being the spokesperson for the president of the United States to being the news person at MSNBC. How in the hell can we allow that to happen and not call that state news? If tomorrow Putin announced that his secretary or his spokesperson is about to become, according to him, anointed into the position of the anchor woman or the anchor man of all of Russian television, what would people say?
Yeah.
We would laugh at that and say, can you imagine how backward? And yet we do the same thing here all the time.
Well,
So
it's not just on a
central-
national. It's not just on a national level, Rick. I've seen it locally as well. I've seen young journalists that stay with an outfit for a spell, and then they go off and be a spokesperson for the Senate staff or the Illinois House staff or whatever it may be. So it happens even on a local level.
And you know what, Greg? As bad as that is, you know what's worse? When they go back.
Right. Yeah. Going from the dark side back to the other side. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Rick Sanchez, real quick, we got just a minute left. Tell me about Agua Media.
Well, Agua Media is an opportunity for a group of people, a cohort, which is right now, Latinos in the United States are the third fastest growing GDP in the world, only behind China and India. We're a fifth of the population of the United States, and we don't have an outlet or an entity. I think because of those numbers and those metrics, it's high time that there is an outlet to be able to tell the very American stories of who Latinos in the United States are. 80% of Latinos are American citizens, and somehow we think they're all sitting around watching Telemundo and Univision. We are not. So that's kind of what we're going to do. But in the end, they're just going to be stories, American stories, told through a Latino perspective.
Rick Sanchez, I wish we had time to talk more about your war correspondence days, because we know that in war, truth is the first casualty, and getting your perspective on how exactly you manage that while being on the ground, I think is fascinating. But we are out of time right now. Hopefully we can touch base with you again in the future.
You are a delight to talk to, Greg. Thanks for the hustle. Thanks for being a good guy and a good journalist. And your community appreciates you, man.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you for joining us. So we'll talk again soon, all right? Be safe.
God bless.
It is Springfield's Morning News now at 7:54 from Culver's West on Wabash.
Butterburgers and fresh frozen custard, handcrafted for you daily at Culver's West.